I never forgot the night the man I loved was stolen by my own sister. Everyone told me to stay quiet, to smile through the humiliation, as if my heartbreak was nothing more than a childish mistake. But it wasn't. That was the moment my world split open, when I learned that the deepest betrayal cuts not from strangers, but from blood. My name is Anna, and this is the story of how that wound never healed until the night I walked into her anniversary dinner. People often look at me and see a calm woman with a steady life, but the scar that still throbs beneath the surface remains invisible to them. For 2 decades it has been there, etched into me the night love turned into humiliation. Back then, I thought forever was what I had found in Marcus. I believed in promises whispered under the glow of dorm room lamps, and in plans scribbled on coffee-stained notebooks. But forever unraveled in an instant when Dahlia, my own sister, slipped into the space I thought was mine, wearing his devotion like a trophy. What burned more deeply than their betrayal was the silence that followed. My father wouldn't meet my eyes, and my mother offered only a cold decree. Learn to bless your sister. She deserves it more than you. Those words cut sharper than Dahlia's betrayal ever could. It wasn't just about losing Marcus. It was about being erased from my own family story, as though my pain was nothing more than petty jealousy. So I left. I carried my fractured heart into a new city, piecing myself together one quiet day at a time. Over the years, I stitched a different kind of life together, one built not on illusions, but on resilience. In Graham, I found something steady, something honest. Our home filled with the smell of roasted dinners, the sound of pages turning, the laughter of our son. It was enough to convince me the past was locked away. Yet sometimes, when a song from those years crackled on the radio, the scar would flare open, raw and alive. Proof that some wounds don't fade, they only wait. One May afternoon, I came home from work to find a thick, cream-colored envelope waiting on the kitchen table. Its polished lettering caught the light, and the names printed in bold made my breath snag in my chest. Dahlia and Marcus. My fingers trembled as I slid it open. Inside was an invitation. 15 years of marriage. A celebration of love they wanted the world to witness. My stomach turned cold. All these years, and they were still together, still living out the life they built on the ruins of mine. Now they wanted me in the audience, applauding. Graham noticed me gripping the card too tightly, the edges bending under my hand. His voice was low, steady. You don't owe them anything. But if you decide to go, don't do it for them. Do it for you. His words settled into me like a weight I wasn't sure I could carry. That evening, the phone rang. My mother's voice, brisk and commanding, filled the line. You have to be there, Verity. The whole family will attend. Don't make trouble. The way she spoke dragged me straight back to that old, suffocating silence, when my pain was treated as nothing but a petty inconvenience. And there it was, the realization that nothing had changed. After all these years, Dahlia still stood in front while I was expected to stand aside. That envelope wasn't just an invitation. It was a key prying open a door to a past I had sworn shut for days. I carried the invitation like a stone in my chest. At school, I read Sylvia Plath aloud, letting her words linger in the quiet classroom when one of my students raised a hand and asked, "Do you believe the past always finds its way back?" The question sliced through me. I knew then that running had never erased anything. It had only delayed the reckoning. That night, Graham reached across the couch, lacing his fingers with mine. His eyes held me steady. "If you go, I'll be beside you. We won't go seeking their approval. We'll go to show you've already left the darkness behind." Something in me unclenched. For the first time in years, I nodded without hesitation. The decision was made. I would walk into that room, whatever waited inside. Later, as I was about to turn out the light, my phone buzzed. A message from a number I hadn't seen in years. "Heard you're coming back. Marcus isn't happy." Not really. But Dahlia will never admit it. I sat there in the dark, phone glowing in my hand, heart pounding with a mix of dread and curiosity. Maybe their perfect facade wasn't unshakable after all. Maybe the cracks were already there, waiting for me to see them. The hotel in downtown Charleston blazed with light. Chandeliers spilled gold across a hall dressed in white roses and crystal. Graham's hand pressed gently against the small of my back as we walked in. But it didn't stop the whispers that rippled through the crowd. Isn't that Verity? The one Marcus left behind all those years ago. My lungs tightened and I drew a long breath, steadying myself against the weight of their eyes. Then Dahlia emerged, radiant in a scarlet gown that caught every flash of light, a diamond necklace resting like armor across her collarbone. She pulled Marcus to her side, smiling at me with triumph flickering behind her lips as though parading proof that the prize was still hers. Marcus managed a polite nod, but his gaze slid away, never once meeting mine. The evening opened with toasts and laughter, brittle as glass. I sipped my wine, listening to the cadence of false joy. Then came the moment no one expected. As Dahlia introduced her family with theatrical pride, her 13-year-old daughter piped up, voice clear as a bell. "Mom, why does Dad always bring up Aunt Anna when you two fight?" The room froze. Marcus flushed crimson. Dahlia forced a laugh that rang hollow, and I sat rigid, every muscle locked. Murmurs broke out, a tide of curiosity spreading through the crowd. The air grew dense, heavy, pressing down on every breath. And in that instant, I knew this night would not dissolve quietly into champagne and polite applause. The party pressed on, but unease clung to the air like smoke. Dahlia seized the microphone, her voice syrupy sweet, each word sharpened like glass. Funny how some people once thought Marcus was their destiny, but fate, of course, had other plans. Laughter rippled across a few tables, thin and cruel. Heat surged into my cheeks, but Graham's hand rested firmly on my shoulder, his quiet anchor holding me still. Then a whisper brushed my ear. A man seated nearby, an old friend of Marcus, leaned closer. "You do know, don't you? Dahlia and Marcus started sneaking around before he ever left you." My pulse spiked. The suspicion I'd carried for years suddenly hardened into truth, delivered not by rumor, but by someone who had seen it unfold. Dahlia paraded her glittering diamond ring, boasting of 15 years of unshakable love, while Marcus sat silent, eyes cast downward as if he couldn't bear to look at anyone. Beneath the polished surface, I sensed cracks widening, a facade stretched too thin. She raised her glass, her eyes locking onto mine with deliberate malice. Some wounds never heal, not unless you learn to forgive. Otherwise they become ugly scars. Heads turned toward me, waiting for a reaction. I lifted my glass with a faint, cool smile, saying nothing. But inside, a quiet vow burned bright. I would not let my story be twisted again. Not tonight, not ever. The anniversary toasts began with glittering smiles and polished laughter. Dahlia took center stage, her scarlet gown shimmering beneath the chandeliers as she raised her glass high. Her voice carried a sweetness that was razor-sharp beneath the surface. Isn't it fascinating how life delivers each of us exactly where we belong? Some loves seem eternal, but they're really just preludes to the ending we were meant to find. The audience chuckled, heads turning subtly toward me, as if I were the punchline of her story. My skin prickled, nerves pulled taut like wires ready to snap. I swallowed hard, pressing my nails into the stem of my glass to anchor myself. Then Graham rose slowly from his chair. His tone was calm, but steel cut through every word. Fate doesn't make choices. People do, and betrayal is never destiny. Tonight is as good a night as any to remember that. The room stilled. The laughter drained away like water down a cracked floorboard. Dahlia's smile stiffened, her eyes flashing with panic before she forced another grin. From the far side of the hall, an older man stood, stooped with age, but his voice rang clear. A longtime friend of my late father. He lifted his glass, gaze fixed on Dahlia. "I saw what happened. You and Marcus began long before he left Anna. Your father would not have wanted my silence to last forever." A gasp spread like wildfire. Dahlia's painted mask faltered. She stammered, forcing a brittle laugh. "You must be mistaken." But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The grand facade she had built for years had cracked wide open. The weight of the silence pressed down until Dahlia shattered it with a shriek. "You always make yourself the victim, Anna. Everyone's exhausted by you." Her voice ricocheted off the chandeliers, jagged and raw, destroying the polished image she'd fought to project. Marcus shifted beside her, face flushed crimson from too much wine. His hands trembled as he set his glass on the table with a dull clink. He stared at the floor, then at me before his voice cracked open. "Dahlia, stop. I never stopped comparing you to Anna. Not once, not ever. The air vanished from the room. Every guest froze, eyes swinging between us as if we stood on trial. Dahlia's body stiffened. Her hand clawed at his arm, desperate, frantic. "Don't say another word," she screamed, her desperation exposing far more than her silence ever could. I looked at Marcus then, but I no longer saw the boy who had once promised me forever. I saw a man aged by regret, shackled to his own mistakes, trapped in a life built on betrayal. And in that moment, clarity struck. The power in this room didn't belong to Dahlia with her venom or Marcus with his confession. It belonged to me, the one who had survived it all. Every pair of eyes was waiting, breath held for what I would say next. I knew the moment of reckoning was no longer far. It was standing at the edge of my lips. The room hung heavy in silence after Marcus's confession, as if every guest had been turned to stone. Dahlia shrieked, clawing at his arm, begging him to sit back down, her voice high and cracked, a banshee's wail tearing through the air. The more she pulled, the clearer the picture became, her mask of perfection crumbling for all to see. I drew a long breath, steadying the quiver in my chest, and rose. The soles of my shoes clicked softly against the marble floor as I walked into the center of the hall. Every gaze followed me. The chandeliers glared above, but I no longer felt small beneath them. My voice came out, even and sharp as a blade. For 20 years, I kept quiet. I stayed silent when my sister stole the man I loved. I stayed silent when my parents told me to bless her instead of mourning what I lost. I stayed silent when I was turned into a joke. But tonight, I will not be silent. The crowd rippled with murmurs, but I pressed forward unflinching. I told them the truth they had never heard, how Dahlia and Marcus crept behind my back, how my pleas were ignored, how my family smothered me beneath their indifference until I had no choice but to leave. I didn't shout, didn't cry. Each word I laid down was measured, precise, heavy enough to split the floor beneath Dahlia's pedestal. Across the room, heads began to tilt, whispers rising like a tide. I caught sight of several guests, old friends of my family, shaking their heads, murmuring to one another, so it was true all this time. Their eyes, once so quick to judge me, now slid toward Dahlia with quiet condemnation. And then I saw her daughter. The girl's wide eyes brimmed with tears, her lip trembling as she stared between her parents. That innocent face, now shattered by the weight of revelation, pierced me deeper than Dahlia's venom ever could. For the first time in 2 decades, I didn't feel like prey under their laughter. I wasn't the discarded sister, the humiliated daughter. I was the one holding the truth, the one who could no longer be erased. And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't just surviving the story they had written for me. I was rewriting it. The hall that only moments ago had echoed with laughter, and the clinking of glasses now sat hollow, stripped bare of its glitter. The music had died, the chatter silenced, as if the chandeliers themselves had dimmed under the weight of revelation. Dahlia collapsed into her chair, her face drained of its color. The triumphant sheen in her eyes was gone, replaced by a vacant panic. She reached for Marcus's arm, but he pulled slightly away. His head bowed, refusing to look at anyone. My mother's lips trembled as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. Her eyes darted between Dahlia and me, caught between denial and the truth now staring her down. For the first time in my life, she had no command to give, no rebuke to lash out. She sat frozen, mute. I didn't need to say more. The truth, once spoken, has a life of its own. It seeped into every corner of that ballroom, filled every silence, and forced every eye to see clearly what they had once ignored. And then Graham rose. He walked to my side with deliberate calm, his hand finding mine. The warmth of his grip steadied me as he lifted his voice, clear and resonant, carrying through the stunned stillness. "This is the strongest woman I know, and I am proud to call her my wife." The words fell like a verdict. From a corner of the room, the first clap rang out, hesitant but firm. It didn't come from my family, but from one of Dahlia's closest friends, a woman who had always basked in her glow. Soon another followed, then another until the sound swelled into a wave of applause. Chairs scraped back as people stood. The same faces that had once turned to me with ridicule or suspicion now watched me with something else entirely. Respect, even admiration. Dahlia shrank under it, shoulders curling inward, her eyes darting desperately for someone to defend her. But no one spoke. Even Marcus sat mute, his jaw clenched, the lines of regret etched deep. Her daughter buried her face in her hands, unable to reconcile the parents she thought she knew with the truth unveiled before her. I stood still, letting the applause roll over me, not as triumph, but as release. I hadn't come here to humiliate my sister. I hadn't come for revenge, not in the way she might have feared. All I had done was speak what had long been denied. And that was enough. Because truth doesn't scream. It lingers, undeniable, until it breaks everything built on lies. I turned my head slightly, catching sight of my mother. She lowered her gaze, unable to hold mine. For the first time she looked small to me, not in stature, but in certainty. The authority she had wielded all my life dissolved into silence. Perhaps she realized in that moment that her insistence on siding with Dahlia had cost her far more than she ever imagined. Graham's hand tightened around mine, anchoring me in the storm of stares. His presence was a reminder that my strength had not grown from bitterness, but from choosing differently, from building a life that couldn't be touched by Dahlia's shadows. I didn't need to watch Dahlia crumble. I didn't need to see Marcus sink further into his regret. The truth itself was the sentence. And in that room, under the fading glow of chandeliers, I understood. Exposing their lies was never about tearing them down. It was about freeing myself. And I was finally free. We left the hall in silence, the heavy doors closing behind us like the final page of a chapter one never thought I'd finish. Outside, the Charleston air rushed at me, briny, brisk, alive. The wind carried the scent of salt and sea, sharp enough to sting my lungs. Yet it felt pure, almost holy. I tilted my head upward, and for the first time in years, the night sky wasn't suffocating. The stars weren't veiled by memories. They shone clear and unburdened, as if daring me to do the same. I realized then I had already won. Not because Dahlia sat collapsed in that glittering hall, her mask torn away, nor because Marcus drowned in the weight of his own confession. My victory wasn't their ruin. It was my release. I had finally spoken, finally been heard. The chains of silence had broken, and in their place stood something I hadn't felt in decades. Peace. Graham reached for my hand, his fingers warm and certain. His smile was soft, steady, the kind of smile that rooted me to this new reality. "You did it," he whispered. "From now on you don't owe anyone anything." My throat tightened, but I nodded. He was right. I owed nothing to Dahlia, to Marcus, not even to the mother who had once silenced me. My life was my own. As the car rolled through the quiet streets, my phone buzzed. A message lit up the dark interior. For words, "You're free now." I knew instantly who had sent it. The old friend who had warned me. The one who'd seen the cracks long before I dared admit they were there. My laugh broke loose, wet and trembling, as tears slid down my cheeks. The sweetest revenge was never their destruction. It was this moment, driving away hand in hand with the man who chose me, heart steady in the life I had built, standing tall not in bitterness but in joy. And at last I had done it. I had stepped fully into the light.